a unique format. We start to see an emphasis on the environment and the greater universe. What does it mean to be human? And we see this in our anime. Now, very much like the medieval samurai who donned his armor, and you see a traditional armor set up on the left here, our giant robots must be donned or put on or gotten into by, for the most part, a prepubescent boy or sometimes girl who has to go wear them and fight in space. You see a Gundam on the right here, and then on the left, as I said, a traditional samurai outfit. Now, what happens is the samurai goes from being a fairly small, heavily armored individual to a giant. This is a big machine, and he's fighting in space. Some more Gundams. But what's really funny is he's fighting using traditional swords and halberds, big long poles, in three-dimensional space where there's no up, down, right, left. So he's engaging, for the most part, not always, in almost hand-to-hand combat in space. So our robots are just samurai. And if you look at some of them, let's see if I have it. There's some of the traditional helmets and weaponry. And if you look at our Gundam, what do you see? You see big heavy boots, big shoulder pads, just like in traditional armor. A helmet with a crest on it, just like in medieval warfare. And in a lot of cases, I didn't have a picture of it, samurai fighting in the 18th, 17th century wore solid lacquer masks over their faces so they wouldn't get hit by a sword. Same thing in a robot. So the animators who are creating our figures like Gundam are in fact paying attention to their own culture. They know their own culture and they just made it bigger and better in space. Now I'll grant you, the guy on the left has like a automatic weapon and stuff too, but again, there's a lot of traditional weaponry. Now the Gundam series is one of the most long-lasting of the giant robot series. It's at least 30 years old now and has had a number of incarnations over time, and the next panel, next door, is going to be about Gundam, so that'll be kind of fun. It's got a lot of different types of robots over time. I remember my stepson was collecting them, and we had like, some of them just were different colors, but they were the same robot. There's a gazillion of them. I have a girl one who's pink, and she's got one of those ribbons from rhythmic gymnastics as her weapon. But anyway. So this series pretty much is a take on Star Wars to some extent, with some space politics thrown in, kind of a metaphor for Japan's post-war baby boomers. It's as they're trying to find their place in the world. The story essentially revolves around Rebel Earth and its Rebel space colonies, and again we talked about the fact that the robots are piloted, by young boys who must get into them. Another giant robot series, originally intended to be the last word on giant robots, but that didn't work out so well. Neon Genesis Evangelion. How many of you know Evangelion? Yeah, pretty much everybody. The story of a post-apocalyptic world where, again, Earth is being invaded by angels from outside of our world, and the Japanese to save the world. They do this through a mysterious organization called NERV, which creates giant Ava units, which are piloted by young men and women. From my perspective, it's a really interesting story because it uses Western religious symbolism as a mark of that which is not Japanese. The angels are all named after biblical angels, even though they don't look like angels until the last one. The computers are named after the three wise men. One of the characters wears a cross, so she's a Christian. There's a lot of this use of Western religious symbolism to mark outsiders. So from that perspective, it's really an interesting story. And since most of you know, it ran as a series for a long time. I think it's 10 DVDs total. I had 3 films because the fans hated the first 2 and didn't like the way it ended. And finally, they got their wish with the last movie. But it's a very sophisticated storyline, again, with characters who have a lot of dimension, very unlike what we find here in the West in our cartoons. After the economic bubble in Japan burst, these series are really seen as Japan's kind of fight against the idea of globalization, a fight that Miyazaki carries on in his film.